Is Final Fantasy XIV the superior game compared to World of Warcraft? This discussion is more than one of personal preference. It is rooted in core game design principles that we will take a closer look at in this series. I am Minardi and this is my Final Fantasy XIV vs World of Warcraft series. As game designer and World of Warcraft player of over 15 years, I made the switch to Final Fantasy XIV at the end of Shadowbringers and never looked back, even after Dragonflight's huge improvements. In this series, I will break down how Final Fantasy XIV compares in design philosophy, balance, combat, story, and monetization to World of Warcraft, where it succeeds, but also where it fails to outshine its competitor. For this episode, we will focus on the two fundamental game design mistakes that caused World of Warcraft to lose its edge, allowing Final Fantasy to rise. How often have players told Blizzard about obvious problems in the alpha stages of an expansion and were ignored, only for those exact problems to haunt the expansion and stay largely unresolved until the very last patch? This is a story every longtime WoW player can tell in 100 different versions. Let's take a look at an example of inelegant design, alt friendliness. Many new systems will cause immediate red flags to appear with players that enjoy playing a wide array of classes. And while progress in this area has definitely been made, every expansion a new thing pops up where players ask, why is this not account-wide? Final Fantasy XIV largely solved this issue at the base level by making alt characters redundant for a large portion of the player base. All jobs, the Final Fantasy equivalent to classes, can be leveled on a single character and you can swap between them without restriction. This is an elegant solution. Having to keep alt friendliness in mind for every system you develop is not. But this topic goes much deeper. From live letters and interviews, we often hear the thoughts and concerns of the Final Fantasy XIV developers, while World of Warcraft developers tend to not share much about their design process. Often, Yoshi P tells us that they chose to implement something a particular way to avoid wasting the player's time, ensure players engage with the system in a mindful, responsible way, and interactions stay friendly. To visualize this, let's look at how forming pre-made parties works for both games. In World of Warcraft, the party leader has to post their group in the LFG Tool. Players can apply and have to be invited manually by the party leader. Some settings can be used, like which content will be done, required item level, and a custom title and description. Meanwhile, in Final Fantasy XIV's PartyFinder, the party leader has to go through some additional effort, having to set up the structure of their party, allow jobs, purpose of the party, if you need to have the duty completed already, loot rules and duty settings. Players do not have to apply to the party. If they fulfill the requirements, they can join directly. Now, I firmly believe that Final Fantasy XIV's system is far superior, and even though World of Warcraft would require some different settings, it would be better for the game as well. The main advantages of Final Fantasy XIV's PartyFinder is that it is set and forget. After the initial setup, you can go AFK and make a coffee. In World of Warcraft, you are required to stay glued to the screen and accept, decline, or I guess mainly ignore applicants. It is true that you can pick and choose your members in World of Warcraft. However, it fosters a dynamic where you never accept anyone barely meeting the requirements in favor of waiting for a better equipped or scored player. Many are under the false impression that them choosing their players has an actual impact on the success of the dungeon or raid they want to complete. But I disagree with this notion. To give an anecdote, whenever I look for players for Siege of Orgrimmar in Mists of Pandaria, parties I made with high requirements performed much worse than parties aimed at alt characters with lower requirements. To add to the stress of party leaders, they will regularly receive messages from applicants feeling they are owed a spot in their party and will make their frustration of not being invited known. From the side of players wanting to join parties, it is a similar story. In World of Warcraft, you often have to apply to dozens of parties to be accepted, especially for DPS players, even though you fulfill the party's requirements, simply because the party leaders are waiting for more overgeared players. It is an incredibly frustrating experience from either side. In Final Fantasy XIV, on the other hand, you search for a party that looks promising, has requirements you fulfill, and simply join. Now, before you blame this situation on player behavior, understand that the people playing Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft are largely the same. Both are tab-targeting medieval fantasy MMORPGs focused on endgame content. That's a very specific niche. Player behavior is almost entirely born from a game's design, not the actual type of person playing it. And this is the point I'm trying to make. The dynamics of a design choice is evaluated in Final Fantasy XIV, but not so much in World of Warcraft's case. It is almost like Creative Business Unit 3 knows their design dictates behavior, while the World of Warcraft team chooses to blame the player for interacting with their design in an undesirable way. What many players, and apparently also developers, fail to understand is how heavily World of Warcraft relies on conditioning. The game is fundamentally built on Skinner box systems. Dungeons, raids, world quests, bosses. You do these activities and sometimes, if the game decides so, you are rewarded. This random reward structure conditions the player to continue these activities far past what is enjoyable. Comparatively, Final Fantasy XIV does not rely on randomness to reward you. While there is still the roll of the dice, whether you win an item in Savage raids and Extreme raids, you will always also receive tokens in the form of books or totems that can be exchanged for all loot obtainable. This ensures you will eventually get what you are after and never leave you entirely empty-handed. This leads to behavior where the player will rather stop engaging with content they no longer enjoy, or, despite not gaining any reward, still do the activity purely for fun. If you have played World of Warcraft, it becomes hard telling what you actually enjoy, as the sole focus of thinking becomes increasing your character's power and which activity is the best to do so. Worse yet, not chasing increases in power is generally frowned upon and punished by the community. Now, how does this relate to development and design? Blizzard notoriously ignores player feedback in favor of metrics and statistics. However, their numbers are fundamentally flawed. A player base that is conditioned to increase their character's power will engage with unpopular systems like Torghast because they feel they have to, and subsequently prioritize these activities over those that may be more enjoyable but provide less, no, or merely a cosmetic reward. This leads to the numbers showing great engagement with the unpopular system and low engagement with the fun system, and thus the developers are conditioned, ironically, by the conditioning of the player base, to perpetuate the cycle and focus their design on more systems that are not actually fun, but have this random conditioning reward structure. This is why World of Warcraft can feel like such a waste of time or like a job. The developer put a hoop in front of you to jump through to get your treat, but you don't enjoy jumping, merely the treat. It is similar to working. You might enjoy the work itself, but you very much enjoy your paycheck. But who wants to be tricked into performing work while playing? Final Fantasy XIV is more like an actual theme park, where you pick the attraction you want to go on, based on fun, not based on which photos you want to leave the theme park with. Now, if you not only played World of Warcraft, but also stop playing it for a longer period of time, you know this conditioning is not permanent. This is why a break can feel like such a breath of fresh air, and why even returning to WoW can feel good, since you will approach the game differently, simply by the nature of the conditioning having weakened or disappeared. This is why it is hard to stay away from World of Warcraft. Yoshi P famously states that he supports players unsubscribing, taking a break, whenever there is no new content between patches and particularly between expansions. Since engagement is based on fun rather than conditioning, this gamble pays off, as players are likely to return once new content arrives. Both games get you to return, but WoW is like an abusive relationship, while Final Fantasy XIV is a place you had a good time at. I know this video has been very critical of World of Warcraft and favorable towards Final Fantasy XIV. There's certainly things WoW does better. To give an example, UI. Not the combat UI, every other UI. But even the combat UI they overhauled to usable state in Dragonflight. However, this video's focus was the two huge flaws in the way WoW was being designed in the past 15 years. I have not tried the War Within, nor do I intend to, But I hear a lot of good things about it, and it would make me happy knowing that WoW continued to make steps in the right direction. Who knows, maybe I will end up looking back one day. In the next video, this series will tackle game balance, class, and item design. If you feel like it, come visit my Twitch stream. There you can ask me about the two games, get a sneak peek at the next video, watch me play high-end Final Fantasy XIV content, or even give me criticism. That's it for today. Go away now. Wait, I'm not the critical drinker. I need my own outro. What did I say in the last one? Alright, thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Menari out.